Hi, everyone. I am Amanda, the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. You're here as part of our AI Launchpad series, a webinar series that we started back in June. I can't believe it's now fall weather, but we're here at that time, our Wednesday night webinar. And today we're talking about formative feedback with AI. We know from the Facebook group of ChatGPT to teachers we talk to every day and educators that there's a really strong want to use AI for feedback, but we want to really situate our conversation as always in a balanced approach. So we're going to be looking at both the opportunities and risks of using AI to support your feedback that you're giving to students. And so I'm really excited to be joined today by Alex. Alex is the head of data at Brisk Teaching. He is an amazing technologist, but also thinker in the space. He's been building these tools for Brisk. And so we're really going to talk about what feedback has been, why it's important, and how we can make it better. So to start, what I want to say is this is your time, not just ours. So whether it's in the middle of the morning, it's the evening with us, or you're somewhere in the middle of the night, which has happened, we want you to get involved. So I already see some people adding where you're from. So say hello, where you're from, even what you do, that would be great. So Esther from Taiwan, hello. I know it's definitely the morning there. Morocco, we'll see people from all over the world, but you engage with your peers because this is the opportunity to really connect and share best practices and resources. And so I really think it's an opportunity for you all to build your own networks. We also want you to prompt with us. We'll be doing some work a little bit later with ChatGPT, as well as looking at Brisk. And so we want you to get hands-on. So this is meant to be not just a conversation between Alex and I, but an opportunity for you two to have this moment of really getting on hands-on keyboard and understanding what the possibilities are. So I want to say, thank you for joining us again. We're so lucky to have you here with us. This is, I think, our 14th webinar, and we have a couple of really great ones coming up as well. So we have running a generative AI PD at your school. So actually, I get to do that a lot with both school districts and schools. So I'll be sharing our best practices, including some resources and some PD itself to share. We're also going to do a prompt engineering for educators piece that's going to be very hands-on. And then the final one is I'm going to be doing Harry Pickens, who is one of the moderators for the ChatGPT teachers Facebook group that has almost 400,000 people in it, including some people I'm sure that are here. We'll be talking about the top mistakes that educators make with AI. And this is actually really based. I was doing a presentation just a couple weeks ago, and I watched a teacher make 3 mistakes with ChatGPT in 2 minutes because it's not that intuitive. So welcome. We're so excited to have you here. And now I get to hand it over to my wonderful guest, Alex. So Alex, I always ask the same question. Please take some time to introduce yourself to our wonderful group of people that are watching. And then also tell me about the first time that your first experience with generative AI.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Amanda. My name's Alex. I'm the head of data at Brisk Teaching, which is a Chrome extension that uses generative AI to help teachers in a variety of their workflows. And I've been working in education technology for about 7 years now, and a lot of that time has actually been spent building feedback tools. And with Brisk, we're adding in generative AI into those feedback tools. In terms of my first experience with generative AI, I was trying to look back through my ChatGPT chat history, and I'm pretty sure my very first one was I was about to go on a trip with 2 of my friends, and I asked ChatGPT to write this funny poem for me about this trip we were going to go on to Vancouver to get us excited for the trip. It was very cheesy, but I think it was especially when ChatGPT first launched, there was a lot of people using it for poems and all these creative tasks, which was a lot of fun. Of course, since then I've used it for a lot of other things aside from that, but that was my first experience.
That's fun. I always love it. There's we were saying that this is kind of the Rorschach test of what you use. And we've had a lot of people that use it for their own, a trip is a really common one. And I use it to build a rubric because I hate rubrics. And so, we all have our own things that we focus on. But, I think it's really great to have you here because you're a really great example of someone that was building formative feedback and feedback tools. And then there's been this explosion of possibility with generative AI, especially around this ability to generate new things from text, right? And so I think it's going to be really interesting to get your perspective of how that has grown. But I want to start with, what do we know about why feedback is important in the first place? What do we know about what good feedback is?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, the learning science tells us that the really big important things with feedback are that it's timely and that it's targeted. So by timely, that means that after a student submits work, or not, also expanding beyond students, like if I give a proposal to someone else I'm working on and they're able to give me that feedback really quickly, then it means that it's much more likely that I'll be able to take in that feedback and actually put it forward to a better next product. And then targeted in terms of being specific, giving me concrete ideas for how to improve and get better. Yeah, so those are the first things that come to mind for me, are timely and targeted.
I mean, I will be honest, I'll be the proxy for a lot of educators here. I don't know how timely and targeted I was, especially as a high school teacher when I had like 125 to 150 lab reports to grade. Sometimes what ended up happening is that I was timely, but I definitely wasn't targeted. So what would happen is I would, do the kind of like check, 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 check. And if it was there, it was enough. Or I would do the deep dive and then it would take me a really long time to do. And so I think that that's a natural thing that we see happen over and over again, especially when we have more and more types of assessments that we have to grade. And so we're talking like in formative assessments, even more interesting because that's something that's supposed to build towards like a student being able to do a summative assessment, right? So it's even more important because these are incremental progressions that students should be making, right? And I think what I see now is that it's so much more important now to focus on those smaller pieces because summative assessments are so easy to use AI to complete. So, I mean, I think like for us, when I talk to educators and love to get your perspective on this, we see that this 5-paragraph essay or the lab report I just talked about, or an argumentative essay, or even like a portfolio project, it's a lot easier for for students to use generative AI tools to do that formal work, that it's very hard to understand where they've actually come and grown from and what skills they've learned.
Mm. Yeah, I think that is a really big question that and from the schools that we've been talking to that have started partnering with us with Brisk, that's definitely on all of their minds in terms of like how do we make summative assessments more AI resistant? How do we assess students' knowledge and the skills that they're building? And I also want to touch on the piece you were talking about of like those formative pieces being so important. I think another thing that I've seen from my work on building feedback tools is also just giving students sort of more at-bats to improve their skills and have more of those feedback cycles is really important. We've definitely talked to teachers who have been really grateful to be able to have ways of speeding up the feedback process on those formative assessments so that when the student actually gets to that final product, they have a better material that they can share because they've gone through more iterations. So yeah, that formative piece is really critical.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because when we see like what I see a lot when I'm talking to ed tech founders is that you're building these feedback tools and you know who the major user is? Like they're building it for teachers. So like, okay, a teacher is going to want to use this feedback tool. What's happening is students are using the feedback tool. So I've talked to Moat, talked to Co-Grader and others, and it's really interesting to see how quickly students are adopting this work to get maybe not perfect feedback, which we'll talk about in a moment, but timely feedback so that they can improve their writing or they can improve their output. So I think that's a really interesting point of view. And so let's talk about this. So like, in the past, let's talk about the things you were building. So if you were creating a technology that was going to be providing feedback, there were essay graders, right? There, I think the SAT or like standardized tests had some automatic grading. Like what was that? And then how has it changed? And what's the difference between that and generative AI now?
Yeah, for sure. So the tools that I was working on, I was on a team that was working on something called the Summit Learning Program. And actually a couple of the people that are on the Brisk team, we were all working together on that project as well. And actually, a lot of the tools that we were building were actually focused on trying to help teachers give better feedback. So building tools like being able to tag a comment with a specific rubric dimension to like help connect the feedback that the teacher is giving to this standard aligned rubric that is attached to this project. Also things like comment banks. And I think what really excites me about the potential with generative AI is that it's much more adaptive and responsive compared to a comment bank, which is static and also takes a lot of time to populate at the beginning. And I think that generative AI can really make that workflow like 10 times faster than ever before.
Yeah, and for those that may not know, like a comment bank was like is this opportunity. A lot of AI before was like rule based, and it still is, but it's this idea that you'd build like a whole bunch of comments that were pretty, applicable, and then you would tag them to like different types of feedback that like this is passive voice or this is active voice. And then if it was seen as active or passive voice, the comment bank would say, here are some comments that you can use. And so that's an example of an older school look at AI or machine learning. But now what you're talking about is that it could be significantly more customized. It can be on the fly. Like the comment bank is important, I think, for training the tool, right? Meaning that they're seeing great comments and those types of pieces before it's generating new types of comments. But the fact that it can be directly like attributed to someone's experience of something that they've written instead of something generic, even if targeted, I think that's really where it starts to get pretty interesting. And so when we think about like let's talk about like what's possible right now and like what the limitations are before we talk about what we think will be possible in a couple of years. So like if I was going to say, hey, Alex, I'm a brand new teacher, or I'm a 25-year teacher, and I want help grading. I want that to do. What should I know? What can I do and what can I not do right now?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, all of this also, we're all kind of experimentalists here that are part of this webinar. So I think a lot of this is also trial and error and also seeing what you're personally comfortable with. From my perspective and the testing that I've done, I think that generative AI can be really useful when given all of that context that you have as a teacher. So your knowledge about the students in your class, your knowledge about the learning objectives for the assignment, and using that to help sort of guide the AI towards potential feedback or comments that it can leave on a paper. I think where you really want to be careful, as always, with hallucinations or like just incorrect information. So if it's leaving feedback on something and saying that there's a grammar error, but there's not actually a grammar error, that's definitely a big thing to watch out for. I think the other thing is just trusting that the AI will sort of magically be able to pull out the most significant misconceptions or most significant pieces of feedback that need to be given for the student. I don't think that the systems are actually there yet. And so relying on it to be able to find the most important thing isn't something that you should do.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that this is that idea of like magic, right? That these things, these new computer programs are thinking. And so they can use all of that context and knowledge and that art and science of teaching to go, okay, I know Alex, and Alex does a great job of construction, but I need to really help him improve on X. And so I'm going to target my feedback to that. That is not something that an AI can do. It also can't do like, a forced ranking of like what the most important thing to look for is unless you tell it that. And even if you tell it that, there's a really good chance that if that thing doesn't exist in a paper, instead of the bot saying, hey, that doesn't exist, it'll make it up. And that's a really common form of hallucination, which is this idea that something is in a rubric or in a list or something you're asking that doesn't exist in the paper that you're asking it to grade. It'll often instead say, it's not there, but like I'm a predictive engine, so it could be there. And if it was there, it'd look like this. And it can be very convincing. And I think that this is where like we really have to be careful. And when we think about feedback in this manner, whether it's formative or summative, is that you never want to have a bot or even peer feedback. Let's say you had students giving feedback, be the final draft. You always want to take this as an opportunity to get a second eye, to get a place to start, to get, something that has maybe more targeted or in a friendlier tone or those types of pieces. But you never want to say, here's this thing, let's grade it without looking at it. And the way that I think about this is that, to your point earlier, let's say that we have a grading that we're doing, and you're like, it says it's lots of grammatical errors. But actually what happened is a student used really interesting construction of language that was really unique and interesting and still grammatically correct. And you submit that back to the student, and they get upset and they ask you why. And then you don't know the answer because you didn't grade the paper really. And that to me is the exact same correlate to a student using AI as a final draft, and then being asked what was in that paper and not being able to say it. And so I think that that's where I see like the concern here of even if you got really comfortable with a tool like Brisk, you can't rely on it 100%, but maybe that false sense of security will make you want to rely on it. But it only takes one time to lose trust, whether you're a student but using it incorrectly or a teacher. And I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, I think with all of these different uses of AI, where talking about like the 80-20 rule or 95-5 rule, all of those types of things where you can let AI do a portion of the work for you, and it could be a lot faster than doing it manually, but you still need to be that sort of critical piece in between showing it to a student, for example, to make sure it's relevant, to make sure you're not losing trust anywhere. I guess adding on to what you're talking about in terms of limitations and like using this term grading and feedback, I think something that we're definitely very against at Brisk is using AI for actually giving scores, like numeric scores on essays. I know we're talking about formative feedback here, but I think that's, again, a place where it's easy to think that this AI is extremely intelligent and would be able to kind of objectively give a score on a paper, but then you run the same paper through the AI multiple times and get different scores. You change the language slightly and get a very different score. And so we think for scoring in particular, also, it's like very unreliable and shouldn't be used for that.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very interesting point of that. These tools are designed to be variable and to be interesting and creative. And so you see it as a prompt works one day and not the other because of that, like that variation, that temperature. So I think it's pretty interesting to look at. And someone just said assessment is never objective. And so I actually want to, Anna, I think this is a really good point. It isn't, and it hasn't been, but there is an opportunity, I think, with AI to create less biased content. And I think that this are like feedback, because that bot isn't tired. It doesn't know you went to the dean's office. It doesn't know that you can be quite loud in the classroom. And so I think that there are some opportunities for consistency of the same approach, especially with tools like Brisk, which are designed to have that kind of consistent approach, that more boring approach where you get a good outcome more likely. So like we're going to do, so we're going to actually show some stuff. We talked about this being hands-on. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do two things. So Alex is going to show kind of how to use like ChatGPT to potentially show some like limitations and capabilities of grading with that tool, and then looking at Brisk. And then I'm going to show some examples of how to use our prompt library to create some formative assessments on the other end that can be a little bit more engaging for your students using those tools. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Alex. I'm really excited to see, actually. I love kind of breaking ChatGPT because I think it's such a great opportunity. And I haven't seen Brisk live, so this is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, okay. I will share my screen. Okay, great. So I'm gonna start in ChatGPT and with 3.5, just the free version of ChatGPT. And I have some like demo student essays here that I've prepared. And so maybe to start, I'll pull this one in. And we can start with something really basic, like please give feedback on this student essay. And what we're going to do is we're going to iterate from here and try to get to kind of a better prompt that gives us more useful feedback. And then I'll also show you what the feedback in Brisk looks like. So I'll submit this. And okay, so let's look at this. So as you can see, it's pretty generic feedback. It's certainly timely because we put it in and it came out immediately. It's maybe somewhat targeted. It does sort of reference some of the topics that are explored in the essay, but it's not particularly helpful, I would say. And then also the formatting is a little bit kind of hard to go through. I don't know if a student would be able to look at this and be able to make reasonable revisions based on just copy and pasting this. So I think to start, one thing that you can think about is the format of the output from ChatGPT. So for example,
Alex, just really quickly, one thing is, can we make it a little bit larger so that people can see 10
yes.
plus?
Maybe I'll also.
Yeah, yeah. So, but also I think this is a good example of this prompt is a bad prompt, and it's not because, and so, but this prompt is a prompt that's used a lot in that same format of something as like the expectation that the context doesn't matter. I think if you hit Command plus, if you're on a Mac, it'll make it much bigger.
Command plus or
Other way. Oh, it's funny. It's going the other way. Oh
or
no.
you want it? Oh, I see. Sorry. I
Yeah,
thought
at
you
least want it bigger so people can read. Yeah, that's great.
got it. Sorry, I thought you wanted to see more of the window. Okay.
No, good.
On the same page now. Okay. Yeah, great. So now we can scan through these this feedback a little bit, but yeah, as Amanda said, intentionally not a good prompt, but I think a common starting point for this kind of thing. So I think one thing that you can think about next is the format that the output is generated in. So right now it's a numbered kind of list. You could turn it into a bulleted list if you want. You could also do something like, here, let's see. I have something copied here. So here what I'm doing is asking ChatGPT to actually format this pretty differently. So it's pulling out quotes from the paper and then leaving a comment for each of those quotes in a way that's a little bit more like how you might make line edits on a paper. So let's try this just in the same context window. And as you can see, we get a really different output. And it also messed up actually because this is not even the topic that this essay was about. So that is
an example of hallucination.
A great example of hallucination because it's talking about the Industrial Revolution now, which is not what this paper is about. So let me copy the paper back in and paste it there. And I think now it should do a better job. Okay, great. So now we have this different format. So this is, again, just a way that you can iterate on prompts and get it into more of a format of what you're looking for by giving examples to ChatGPT. And then the last and probably most important thing that I want to talk about is sort of tone, style, and content. So this is where all of your expertise as a teacher, everything you know about your students and your community comes in, is how these comments should be phrased, how what the learning objective of this assignment was, and what students should be striving for. Because as you can see from this initial prompt we have, it's just asking for feedback, but with no context on what the student was actually trying to do in this assignment. A simple thing you could do it with sort of tone and style would be saying something like, please use like, how might you questions to engage the student in the learning process in your comments.
So I really like that because that's really specific also in terms of what you would want it to do. But like, and if we can go back up, like this is a really good example of where you can start with the better prompt, but then the more specific and in your own language or your pedagogical language of your school or system, what you can do is you can really get there faster. And the good part about this is that I don't think we're suggesting you don't read that paper to do this, but to read, there was actually a good question in the thing, like, is this more work? I mean, what I would say is reading the paper probably takes you maybe 2 to 5 minutes, depending on the length. That gives you a good base to then be able to use this tool, because then you can actually see very quickly what's good and not, and start to pull. And what you're doing is the same thing that we would want students to do, which is like getting to a better thing quicker, or in a less steps, and to get in something that then you can refine to be even better than what you would do on your own. And I think that collapsing of effort, but without removing effort. And I think this is the idea that was a similar thing to students. Like, this is cognitive load. And we're not saying that this is a one or nothing that you can go and say click, like in that same check mark. But what it is saying is that I can get to something more quickly and better, so that the next time I get to a next paper, I can do the same thing. And by the end of the 100 papers, instead of getting tired and just giving up, what I've done is I keep some level of consistency. And so I think that this is a really good example of how you can do that. And I want to do something. Can we do this, Alex? There's actually John put into the, like, maybe we can start a new context window. And then John McCormick put in a super cool prompt around GPT, like using with the free version, but maybe use the Great Gatsby, and then use his prompts a little bit up the screen. But I think it'd be cool to kind of, like, I love having people from the audience share. And then Dan, if you don't mind sharing the I5S framework with everybody that we have as well, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, okay. I might actually put this, the prompt's a little long, so maybe I'll put it into a doc so everyone can see it here. And then we could try it with the Gatsby essay.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to share the prompts the cool prompt that Alex showed too in the follow-up as well.
Great. Yeah, let's try this. So we have this prompt here, and then I'll paste in this Gatsby essay, and we can see how this works.
I will give an anecdote where I read a lot, but don't remember a lot of what I read. And so I did not do great on my college, my AP exam on on an essay, because I picked The Great Gatsby and then I couldn't remember the character names. So I only got a 3, which is not good enough for Emory, but I wish I could have had a little bit more support along the way and remembered what Daisy's name was.
I think we've all been there.
So this is great. So let's see. So
yeah, so we have the strengths here that are outlined, and then some areas of improvement. And it looks like a lot of it is sort of about like writing mechanics and structure.
yeah, that's really, really interesting. And so for this, they asked for paragraph structure and sentence flow. So sentence variety, depth. So it looks like it's done a decent job of providing feedback on those areas. I think that it's a really good example though of like why prompt libraries are so good, because something like this, you can go back, like John has done a great job. We have our prompt library, which will show in a bit, but this is a really good example of a great, customizable prompt that can be used to get you a bit closer. But now we're actually going to look at Brisk. So I've never seen Brisk live. Like, I know Alex, I know Armand and I are like all in the same places. So I'm going to see him in person next week. But I would love to see like how you do this, because I think one of the cool things I know about Brisk is that it's an extension to Chrome. And so a lot of schools, about 70% of schools in the US, are covered by Google Classroom. So it means a lot of work is being done in Google Docs. So I'm really interested to see how you kind of collapse the amount of effort a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Let's transition to Brisk. And I actually think that last prompt is a nice transition, because it kind of mirrors the like basic prompt we have in the free version of Brisk. So here I am on a Google Doc, and I have my Brisk icon here in the right-hand corner. So whenever I'm on a Google Doc, I can click on Brisk and use it for a variety of things. But in this case, I'll click Give Feedback. And I actually already have a little prompt in here. But I think to start, so I'll choose the grade level here, maybe 9th grade. I think that's usually with the Great Gatsby what grade level students are at. And then maybe I'll do kind of similar guidance as the prompt that was submitted around providing feedback on paragraph structure and sentence flow. So I'll just do a really simple prompt. And then I'll click this pink button here that says Brisket. And what Brisk will do in this side panel is kind of act as a thought partner for me in giving feedback on this essay. So by default, we structure the feedback in glow, grow, and wondering. And we've actually heard a lot of teachers really like this and like start to incorporate this into sort of their school language and using glow and grow outside of just the context of using Brisk. But we like this as like a starting point because it helps to make sure that we're providing kind of some a balanced starting point for the feedback that you're going to give in this essay. We have some kind of positive comment, more constructive comment, and then some pondering questions that are engaging the student in thinking about sort of where they could go next with this. Oh, sorry, I think.
Yeah, I'm muted, of course. Is there a possibility to change up that format if like grow, glow, and wondering wasn't the format of the teacher uses or the school uses?
Yeah, and let me show you. So maybe I can demo quickly what it looks like when also we could incorporate a rubric into the feedback too. So let me open up a new doc and I'll use Brisk again to create a rubric this time with Write with Brisk. I'm already on a rubric actually, it looks like. So I have some options here in terms of like grade level and the point scale of the rubric. I think I'll do a 3-point scale because these rubrics can get pretty long.
I will say an 8-point rubric. I do not want to be that student or that teacher. Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And I'll do something really basic for this demo, but of course, like be as specific as possible for your actual classroom. So we'll do something like create a literary analysis rubric with, let's just do 3 rubric criteria. You could also be more prescriptive about the types of rubric criteria you want, whether it's like grammar conventions or style or organization. So it starts out looking a little wonky, but in just a moment, it will be formatted into a real table. And then we could use this rubric to give feedback in Brisk, and I can also show you what sort of the more advanced feedback feature looks like that goes beyond that glow, grow, wondering type format.
Can you actually edit this now and like change this rubric? Yeah, you can't use the generative AI though to keep changing it, right? You're gonna have to do it by hand at this stage.
So we're actually going to release a feature pretty soon that lets you keep kind of riffing on that same like prompt you were working on. So coming soon. So let's copy in this rubric that we have in Google Docs now. And I'll open up Brisk back in this Gatsby essay and click Give Feedback. And I'll toggle on this specific feedback, and we'll see in just a moment what that does. You can just paste in the rubric like this, and it'll be able to parse the different rubric criteria and all of that when giving feedback. So I'll give feedback now, and with this more advanced feature, it actually drafts the comments as Google Doc comments. So obviously you should read through all of these comments and you have the ability to dismiss the comments, to personalize them in any way that you want. But as you can see, it's a lot more targeted and specific in terms of actually pulling out specific quotes from the essay and also being tied to that rubric that we generated earlier.
Let me go up, Alex, to the one above.
Sure.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think that like, with that symbolism piece, like they identify symbols and then there's the example of them, right? Which is really good. I think it's really interesting though, because I think that there's potentially like the possibility of it being like maybe really positive or overly positive, or like I can see that this is something you still would need to look at, like, and I think it's pretty interesting. And you have a lot of interest from people, Alex, I know you're not the boss, but they would like this for free and not in the premium features. But so I'm guessing it's not free at this stage. And does this work outside of Google Docs at this stage, or are you really native in Google Chrome? Could it work in a Word document or something else?
Yeah, so right now it's really just within Google Docs. Although we have some features that sort of you can start from outside of Google Docs, like changing the reading level of articles across the web. And we'll be adding some more features soon that will allow you to kind of generate text from anywhere or generate text into a new Google Doc, even if your starting point isn't a Google Doc.
Right. And I want to say to everyone, generative AI is brand new. It's a brand new baby. So there's a reason why it's in Google Docs, and it's not because they don't want to support other avenues, but you have to make choices as a startup to figure out what's the best place to get it. And because I'm assuming because so many schools are actually using like Google Classroom, that's a great place to help as many people as quickly as possible, which is really cool to see. This is great. I mean, I think we could, can you show us an example of like when it's messed up though? And I hate to do that, like, but like, is there something that that like it can struggle with a bit, so that people, one of the things I really want us to always kind of couch with is you just have to always read it. You have to always like be cognizant. So is there something that that like is just something to be a little careful about?
Yeah, let me find a good example here. So I think kind of as you were saying earlier, the definitely a big thing to watch out for is hallucinations. So either that could be like things that are overly positive or overly negative because you're asking for a positive comment or you're asking for a negative comment, and so it will it's just trying to be like as helpful as possible to you, and so it'll find something to say. And I think another place where that can happen is if you, for example, ask it to correct the grammar in an essay where there's no grammar mistakes, it'll start saying that things are grammar mistakes. So I could show an example kind of like that. Again, this is not a great prompt, but a starting point. Like, please correct the grammar in this student assignment.
And does Brisk have that same issue too, or is it like does it sometimes try to correct grammar that's fine if the grammar is really good?
I actually haven't noticed that. We do use GPT-4 with Brisk's feedback, and so it is better in general than just using 3.5, for example. But I think with any of these AI tools that you're using, whether it's ChatGPT or Bard or Claude, you should always be aware that you can kind of lead the AI in the wrong direction, or it could pull out things like saying that the grammar is incorrect when it's not actually incorrect. And obviously you don't want to share that with a student because that could really confuse them or break trust, as you were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. So I'm just gonna, I know that everyone has access to Brisk, and so we saw some of the limitations of how formative feedback could be a little bit tricky, but it can also, with better prompting, I think you can get to some good stuff, especially as the first draft. But I'm just gonna share our screen just to kind of share some of our resources, so that it's a big part of like what we try to do is make sure that things are accessible as possible. And so we have our prompt library, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And we have quite a few around like feedback and like creating spaces in which feedback happens. And one of my favorite things that happened recently in a session that we had was with a teacher using our exit tickets. There's a very common form of formative feedback. It's really how we kind of catch people like on the way out, what do they know? What do they need to know? And so we've got this exit ticket prompt, and the way our prompt library is designed, it's much less advanced. It's the opposite of the great work that Brisk has done, but it's meant to be a little bit more just like kind of, control your thing, but also see like what's possible. So we have like the prompt that you can change. We have an example prompt, and then we have kind of how it works for you. So you can kind of push and pull it in a lot of ways. And so for this one, it's a fourth grader. I'll go to ChatGPT. And I can put this in, and I'll make this bigger so people can see it. And so you're an expert educator. So like the 5 S's that we have is set the scene. So who do we want to be? You're skilled at creating engaging hands-on lessons and activities for students. And then we're as specific as possible what we want. So we create 5 exit ticket ideas I can use in my 4th grade math class at the end of a geometry lesson on identifying, labeling, and measuring angles. And then the activity questions should be very brief and should serve as a form of assessment to gauge students' understanding the material covered. And so one of the things that's really great about ChatGPT and other Gen AI tools is it's like a brainstorming partner. And so like it would take me forever to come up with 5, and I can ask ChatGPT to come up with 70. And it's going to keep doing it. Maybe they start looking the same or going completely off the rails, but it's a good example of what we have, which is you can do a draw and label, a measure up, a real world connection, angle identification, or vocabulary check. But what's nice is that when we were in the session, one of the teachers immediately said, oh, I'm not going to pick one. I'm going to give all of these options to students, and then they can pick which formative piece they want to do. So if I have a student like Alex, I'm guessing as the head of data science, you're going to like things that are, sciencey, like you're going to want to maybe draw that and like do something math oriented. And maybe I, as someone that likes to talk about things clearly, 14 webinars in, I'm going to want to do something like that's more of a conversation or in this. So I think that this is really where we have an opportunity to start using these tools to broaden our idea and our opportunity around formative assessment. And just like Brisk has their rubric, you can then ask to create a rubric for these as well, like create a checklist or a rubric that can do that. And so here's an example though of a way in which we can broaden our ability to create engaging formative assessments. And because we often think of an assessment isn't engaging or it's just something that kids have to do. But actually what we can do is we can create spaces in which students can show their work and their understanding in ways that matter to them. And so like we have our rubrics, just like I said, this is the very first thing I ever created. It's why the company exists. But we have these opportunities to like even something like a really good critical thinking question. I know when I taught, I was absolutely terrible at asking good questions. And so something like this, again, we can start as a place of building these critical thinking questions. And then from there kind of develop a rubric, a checklist, examples. One of the things, I don't know if Brisk does this, but we have student exemplars. Can you actually provide sample answers for these critical thinking questions, which I'll just show pretty quickly, so that you can actually show students what's expected of them and what a good answer is. And so in this case, I can have, the 10 critical thinking questions. And so supporting documentation, et cetera, and then provide like an example of a student response that shows proficiency in the first 5. And so what you can do now is you can have, and I could be more specific, but here it gives you like short paragraphs that I can then use as exemplars. And this is great, especially if you haven't been able to be like, if you're a new teacher or you're someone that hasn't necessarily kept those great pieces of work. And I think that this is where like formative assessment again starts to kind of broaden with our ability to have this brainstorming partner. And so these are just examples of how we can start to think through formative assessment shifting and changing. Again, we wanted to make sure that we check this and we're always careful, but it can be something that becomes a better experience. So I know that it's in the morning, in the middle of morning, the night for some people. So we're going to stop here in terms of content, but we're going to have some Q&A and I see some great questions. But what we'd love to do is Alex, I met Armand through all kinds of things, but like we love connecting with people. And so I'm here on LinkedIn. I'm Barry on LinkedIn. And then we've got Alex. So please connect with us. We really love these conversations. And I'm sure you're going to have some great questions for Alex coming up. But we just really appreciate those that have to leave for being here with us. And then those that can stay, let's keep talking. So we have some questions already, Alex. And so I'm gonna throw some questions to you. okay, so you might not know this, but is there a plan to kind of expand Brisk? Like, are you guys trying to expand this out of Google Classroom, or are you really thinking about it staying within Google Classroom?
Yeah, so I think for the time being, at least, we're really just focused on expanding the tools that we're integrated with within like the Google suite. So staying within the Google world. But as I mentioned a little earlier, we have some cool features coming out soon that will allow you to sort of work with any piece of text that you come across on the internet or like in an LMS. So not Microsoft Office specifically, but yeah, we have some exciting things coming soon.
Those Microsoft people, I don't know about them, but no, I think that's really interesting, and I think it's a fascinating time. So, do you guys have an AI detection tool? I didn't know this, but you have a question about it. You guys do have an AI detection tool. Does it work?
Yeah, so we do have an AI detection tool. I mean, I think that with all of these AI detectors, it is always giving you a probability. It's never a for sure yes or for sure no. And so I actually, in addition to the AI detection, we think that's like one important data point that can help you in making a decision about how the student authored the paper. But something we're really interested in doing actually is giving you more and more information about how the student may have gone about creating the document in Google Docs. So if it's a Google Doc where they authored the doc, if there was like a really large copy and paste event at one point, flagging that to you so you're aware of it, or also estimating the amount of time that the student spent based on the version history to just give you more signals in addition to AI detection about how the student went about creating that assignment.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not that comfortable with AI detection tools, and I'm sure it does work, but I'm sure it also has false positives and false negatives because there's no watermarking, there's no like ability, and people get better at this, and it's easy, like there are ways to hijack pretty much any kind of technology. But I like the idea of shifting towards more of like what we've seen in other like organizations like Roomy and Cursive. We did one with them a while ago about proof of effort or proof of originality, and I actually talked to a learning designer today who was talking about how they were trying to think about creating AI resistant and AI assisted assessments, and they were just using Google Docs to like look at version history. And that is not what it's been designed for. In fact, unless there's massive change, it doesn't actually record, and you're only going to see like the outcome, so to speak. And so I think it's interesting that you all are moving that way. I really like that idea of instead of trying, like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to catch students, or we're trying to teach students. And like, if our job is to catch students and the problems and the cheating or the plagiarism or something that is, something that we should be like thinking about, like we're going to lose all that time to teach, because the idea of having, we saw this here, that some teachers have prompt journals, which allows them to like grade a student's prompting. Like how much better is it to have that normalized, where students are actually using these tools in a normalized fashion, which they're going to do at work, and not trying to catch them, but then say, hey, like the same way I said to you, like that wasn't a very good prompt, which I know you knew. So I wasn't criticizing you, but it's an example of like, I see people all the time that the stuff that comes out is probably very easy to catch on AI because they do a really crap job of doing it. And they actually include the AI chat. Like I'm an AI chatbot in the answer. Like that's our very like, the very unskilled users. But then there are others that are, using it in a much more sophisticated way that actually we can leverage that critical thinking, that creativity, that effort to do better on the things that we want them to do. So I think there's a really fine balance there. So that's very interesting. So there's another question. Would Brisk moderate output to prevent specific undesirable words to be produced? Also, would student work be sent to OpenAI if we use the tool? So two different questions, one about privacy and one about, I will say like kids using words, like it could be emojis as well. Like we found that out when at Pivot, where I was at before, that kids could use emojis or coded language pretty easily to get around those tools. But do you have anything in place for that?
Yeah, I mean, so we have some like basic kind of content moderation, and I mean, in addition to that, all of these big large language models that are out there also I mean, from my testing at least, it's pretty hard to get anything inappropriate out of them, but we have some safety nets in addition to that. And then about students' work being sent. Yeah, I'm glad you asked about this. I mean, something to always be aware of with using the like web version of ChatGPT, like 3.5, is if you don't turn off your chat history, then the input can be used to train the model. So definitely don't put any PII in there. Also with Brisk, I wouldn't recommend putting PII in there, although we're using the API. And so it's not used to train the models and isn't stored in the same way as the like web-based input to the ChatGPT experience.
So PII means personally identifiable information. Sorry, as I knock my desk, but yeah. So this is an important piece around safety. Also, like Brisk, I'm sure they're using GPT-4, but they're also like there's possibility of other tools using multiple large language models and other tools that could be used and sent in multiple places. So it's better to be safe. I mean, we all should be thinking about digital safety all the time, especially with students, but also with ourselves. I wouldn't tell a tool a lot about me either, like, because I don't really want that. I don't want that getting into the role as well. Okay, so the next one is a really interesting one, and it came up in the chat earlier. So Viviana was asking about, should we be transparent about telling our students that we use AI to generate feedback? How will they feel? Also, we could also provide them with prompts based on certain criteria and ask them to reflect on their AI-generated answers, the changes they had to make, and etc. I have a strong opinion about this, but I'll let you go first, Alex.
Sure. Yeah, I think I mean, I think fundamentally that this again is like kind of a personal decision about what you're comfortable with, your school environment, what makes sense for your for the place where you work and the students you serve. I actually had a conversation with a teacher really recently where he was going the full transparent route and was actually like kind of trying to conduct an experiment within his classroom where he was going to be really upfront with the kids about, okay, here are essays where I'm the one that's giving you feedback and I'm the one grading you, and here's my like organic feedback that I'm leaving. And then here are assignments where I'm using AI to give you feedback and to ask the students like which comments resonate with you, which ones do you like better, which ones help you grow more. So I think that there are a lot of interesting opportunities about going the transparent route and being honest with your students about the fact that you're using AI. But yeah, I think fundamentally it does come down to kind of a personal decision.
Yeah, and I think that for me, we have a PD session on AI policy, and on the first page there's an asterisk that says it's created in partnership with ChatGPT. And the reason why I've done that is that I didn't use it a lot, but I used it for like helping with like the webinar, like the PD hook and a couple other things, is because normalizing our use is the only way we're going to normalize it for students. And so if we're hiding our use, then students are going to hide their use. And that's just not going to be helpful for anybody. It also is an opportunity to get that kind of feedback that's real. Like where are the places in which you want to know that it's me? And like, let's talk about what that looks like. And do we shift some of the ways that we talk to each other and the ways that we support you the same way that we're asking students to shift the way that they're building and creating things, you know? And so maybe some of that feedback is in person. I love feedback that can be done in like a one-on-one conference or a small group conference. Like that has a different, like even if it's AI generated, to have that conversation with students and to listen and to ask and to show that care, I think is something that we don't think about a lot with feedback, and that it's an opportunity for us to do and lean into the things that make us special, which is that creativity, that knowledge, that ability to connect and understand. Like if a kid gets a piece of feedback from an AI and they don't see the kid's eyes well up because it feels so confronting or so difficult, like that's a moment where we as educators would step in and say, hey, like this is something like, why does this hit so hard? And maybe it's because they didn't feel very confident or they were really proud of what they had built and written, and then we're giving them feedback that could be considered harsh or unfeeling. So I think there's just that real need to do that. And one of the great ways you can also do that, to Viviana's point, is that you can ask students to grade their own things with AI. Like I love the refine my work prompt. We have one in our library. Help me make it better. I am so like say that I'm bad at passive voice, then help me make it better, or I want that feedback. And I think that this is where it helps you, because by the time the formative feedback is there and you get the summative feedback at the end, it should be a better outcome because a student also has agency. They're doing it on their own. They're building that knowledge while building their prompt engineering skills as well. Okay, next question. I think this will be our last one. What about college students? Marianne wants to know, you go up to grade 12 with your rubrics, but do you think that this kind of shifts into appropriateness for college age students?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So far, we've really been focused on a K-12 audience and also a teacher audience. So really building the tool for teachers and not for students. I think that if college students started using the tool, we'd love to talk to them and learn more about where they're finding it useful. And I think our focus will still remain on K-12 for now. But who knows, we could maybe focus more on higher ed as well.
That's great. So I want to just maybe call out one more thing around, Kate was pointing out that these tools can be like actively just like biased against non-native English speakers. And so we see that both in plagiarism detectors, we see that in feedback, and in general, these tools have been, you know, designed around the global north, like culture and language. And so I think it is something that it's not just English language learners, it's those that have interest in construction are working really hard to kind of create the purple prose that they think is the best. Like those are going to be probably the most at risk of like AI detection not doing a very good job of identifying it as a false positive or false, or doing it as a positive or negative. So I think it's important to consider that, again, this is a brand new, like this is amazing to see the work that Brisk is doing, but we all need to take everything with a balanced approach, a grain of salt. We want to always think about, to the name of the title of our webinar, which is that formative feedback with AI. It has these opportunities and risks. And then hopefully next time I talk to Alex and like we'll have a different conversation, we'll see even more of what's possible. And so I just really appreciate you being here. I know that people have been with us from literally the middle of the night to the early morning to evening. So I just want to say thank you. And whether it's your, you know, good morning, good night, go to sleep, we just appreciate you having you here. And then, you know, thank you so much, Alex, for your thoughtfulness, your guidance. The things that you're building are amazing, and just really appreciate your time. And I hope that everyone has just such a good rest of your whatever, and we'll hope to see you guys soon. Thanks, everybody.